Sometimes as a content creator, you're casually scrolling through the comments and you find gold. It's a huge part of why I always ask people to comment on my videos, because I read them all and I try to reply to most of them when I can, but sometimes you find something that can change your mind. The other day when I was scrolling through the comments of the FE tier list we did on SpeedyHawk's channel, I'll leave a link to it in the description below if you want to watch the whole thing or see the comment, but this comment might have honestly changed my perspective on a big discussion point for Fire Emblem. We talk a lot about what the best game to recommend to get people started in the series is. Is it Awakening? Is it Sacred Stones? Is it Three Houses? Those are generally some of the more popular names on the recommendation list as they're deemed to be more beginner-friendly and easier to get into. But there's a specific comment by a user of the name of Thohilla's Land. I'm sorry if I butchered the name. If you see this, please correct me on the pronunciation. Anyways, this comment might have changed my perspective on the subject, enough for me to make an entire video on it. Prior to reading the comment, I would have always gone with FE7 personally. I had always felt that Fire Emblem is a game that is more fun when you're able to have a strong grasp on the mechanics of the gameplay, that it doesn't ever get in the way of or hold you back from enjoying the games. What do I mean by this? FE7 teaches you how to play Fire Emblem well in its purest form. Lin mode, even though described as very handholdy, and there's been a lot of recent hate for Lin mode and it's been popular to bash it, but it has one very important takeaway message in basically every chapter. There's never one that doesn't have a purpose or a teaching point, and you will be very likely to never forget what you've learned there and able to put it into practice. Once you get to Eliwood and Hector mode, the training wheels are off, you get your characters revived once whoever died in Lin mode comes back, so don't screw it up again, and now you have to put into play everything you've learned previously. The difficulty scales up slowly and spikes at certain key points in the game, like Dragon's Gate and then Battle Before Dawn, but by the time you reach these maps, your units should be adequately leveled up and invested in, and with proper implementation of the fundamentals you've learned in Lin mode, it's just enough teaching and just enough difficulty increase to get you to think and develop a more efficient playstyle through a difficulty that isn't really that hard, but just enough for a beginner to sweat a little bit. The story is pretty fun as well, and I find the FE7 characters all quite endearing, and let's be real, GBA animations are still some of the best in the series, though they may face some competition with Engage's being absolutely stellar more recently. Anyways, the point here is that I always saw Fire Emblem 7 as the pinnacle of new player entry point into the series because of how it establishes you and sets you up as a player. And I'll admit, I'm biased. I started there and have developed such a deep love for the series, so of course I'll want people to follow my lead and do that too. But anyways, let's go back to the subject of this video. The comment that I've sort of glossed over until now because I wanted to give my opinion. Here's what changed my mind. It's a long comment, so I'm going to break it down because I think they raise a lot of valid points. By the way, if you also want to have a discussion in the comments, this is exactly how you do it. This comment was so respectful, but also so well structured, it actually succeeded in changing my mind. Even I can learn from this way of discussion on how to comment and talk to people. Anyways, it starts off with, quote, "While I think FE7 is a good game, I do not think it is a good introductory game to the series. In fact, I'd say it's probably one of the worst introductory/beginner games. It was probably a great introduction at the time it came out, however, I don't think this is the case anymore. I'm being disagreed with here. I'm being told why I'm being disagreed with, and they think that the FE mindset has shifted somewhat, and that's a very valid point. It definitely has. I base a lot of my reasoning on how I felt 21 years ago when I first played Fire Emblem, and a lot of it is my own feelings and sense, but they're right. It may not be the general public's, especially after over 2 decades. To continue reading the comment, the main goal of an introductory game isn't to teach the player how to play, rather, the main goal should be to hook them and make them interested in trying out more games in the series. So, I think this is the most valid point that's presented in the entire comment. When I read this, it really made me look at things differently and I went, you know, that's actually very true. Let's say if I like something and I really enjoy it, you have a fan of me for life. Xenoblade 2 is a prime example of this. A lot of hate goes around for Xenoblade 2 Online. Highly unwarranted, by the way. That game slaps, and I will die on that hill. But what Xenoblade 2 was, it brought in a lot of new players and made them really love the series. I still think Xenoblade 1 has a little bit of a stronger story and a bit less distractions, But that doesn't make Xenoblade 2 a bad game, and certainly not a bad introductory game. Now, Xenoblade 2 was awful at teaching you how to play, and this is where this sort of point comes in. It had 1,000,000,001 mechanics, and you are learning new things until halfway through the game, and for new fans it can get overwhelming and downright confusing. Heck, even for me who had played it before, it took me a while until I got a hang of the combat. But people loved the game. They loved the characters and the world, and they got so invested that I'm sure even if they didn't understand the initial tutorials, it was enough for them to go look up, read, and learn how to play the game via other avenues that it didn't matter if the game was a good teacher or not. They wanted to do it because they liked it. The old saying always goes, give a man a fish and he eats for a day, teach a man to fish and he eats for a lifetime. But if you make this man fall in love with fishing, he'll take it even further beyond. He'll feed his whole family. He'll feed the neighbors. Heck, he might even open his own sushi restaurant. And at the end of the day, when all is said and done, this man might even teach others what it means to love fishing. So I agree. I think the best game to start with is one that will make someone fall in love with Fire Emblem. So having said that, what is the best game in Fire Emblem to start with? Well, I'm not about to push this person off their soapbox. Let's see what they have to say. New players, especially if they are fans of other JRPGs, do not care about map design, side objectives, varied map objectives, economy, replay value, etc. These things will not hook or impress a new player who has no idea what a good map even means. Okay, I'm going to pause here, because while I mostly agree with this, I do think that these gameplay elements do directly influence the way the game feels to play. If all the map objectives are the same kill boss objectives, the game does start to get a bit stale. Likewise with map design. If it's too harsh and unforgiving and there's only one solution with each map, you're going to get frustrated and annoyed. New players don't have to know what any of these mean in specific, but they are factors that directly influence a player's enjoyment of the game. Now to continue the comment, they say, what these people actually care about is that the game has a memorable story, interesting characters, good world building, and fun mechanics to play and experiment with. These people are not comparing it to other Fire Emblem games. What they are comparing it to are stuff like Chrono Trigger, Xenoblade, Persona 5, or Final Fantasy VII. Honestly, I couldn't agree more with this part, especially the last sentence. These people are not comparing it to other Fire Emblem games. This is so true. The reason why a game like Fire Emblem Three Houses was so successful isn't because it took everything the older games did and made it better. No, it was because it took a radically different approach and feel to all the Fire Emblem games that came before it. It introduced a massive hub world that you can walk around and talk to people with in 3D and was more in depth. It added social activities. It had deep and rich support conversations that rewarded those who spent the time to build affinity with those units can experience. But most importantly, its system, to an outside observer, looks less like traditional Fire Emblem and more like your average JRPG. And that's what probably got people. Now, we all remember the infamous E3 trailer and how much of a banger that was with its political intrigue and drama, so I won't pretend that the story and marketing had nothing to do with it, but it was firing on all cylinders as the perfect game to bring new people in and keep them there. You guys can see that in just this one paragraph, this person has completely changed my mind on introductory FE games, and they're completely right. Now, for the sake of the length of this video, I'm not going to go through the entire rest of the comment. If you guys are interested, again, the link is in the description below, so you can go and find it and read it. But I want to talk about what is the best starting game for new players, having had that little bit of a shift in perspective. This person mentions FE4, FE9, Echoes, and Three Houses. And honestly, I think I agree with all of them and disagree with all of them at the same time. I'll explain. We are currently in the age that I think one recommendation is no longer enough for people. You can't just put a finger on it and say, this one. For every single person, this is the game that you need to start with. I don't think it works like that, because people feel like their time is valuable, and they feel like they need a game that respects and doesn't waste it. And any aspect that does is going to ruin their experience. Personally, I think time is an infinite resource and it's a social construct, and all of that's baloney, but I'm just kidding. Please don't cancel me on Twitter. It's a joke, but I digress. For the most part, I agree with that statement, and what I'm trying to say is that you need to start sorting these games into their own categories. We can't recommend one game anymore. We need to classify them based on the strength that they provide and tailor them to the new players. For example, if you are someone who only cares about story and narrative and you want to experience Fire Emblem Game of Thrones and can tolerate older graphics, older art style, sound fonts, and gameplay mechanics with less of an emphasis on dynamic gameplay, map design, and quality of life, then FE4 is the game for you, for example. I think it still has by far the best themes, storytelling, and gameplay story integration in the entire series, and has one of the best plot twists I have ever seen in gaming, which has unfortunately been spoiled for most, but those who haven't played Fire Emblem might be able to experience that fresh, and that is so worth it. If you're someone who only cares about raw SRPG Fire Emblem gameplay with all of the bells, whistles, and customizations with zero emphasis on story, but you also don't want to go back to games that are too old, maybe you should play Fire Emblem Fates Conquest on some of its harder difficulties. Skip the story and just play the game and maps, and you'll get a good deal with some fantastic music on one of the more modern Fire Emblems. Speaking of which, Fates is almost 10 years old. That's insane to think about. If you're someone who's a more casual JRPG fan and you like the social aspects of some of the newer JRPGs out there, but also want all the customizations and freedom to do whatever you want with the units you love, but also want rich lore, character development, and nice story experiences, then this is where Three Houses excels. I could go on and on and on and break down every single good thing every single game does, and maybe I will in the future. That might not be a bad idea, but the point is, maybe we need to move away from classic one-size-fits-all recommendations and start putting them in boxes for different people with different tastes. This was all off the top of my head and definitely something that warrants further thought and discussion. Maybe you guys can chip in the comments here and let me know what you think. But yeah, that was a great comment. Really gave me some food for thought. It gave me an entire video to put out, and I genuinely enjoyed writing the script for this, so thank you. Just one last thing before I let you all go. The Fire Emblem co-op first episode was an absolute banger. I encourage you all to check out the VOD, please. I'm also going to do a weekly recap for all of these, probably later on in the week, closer to before the stream comes out for the week after. Also, Dark Deity 2 recently revealed a new trailer, and I broke that down in my last video, so go show them some love. They really deserve a look at their second game, for sure. Anyways, that's about it, and I'll see you all in the next video very soon. Peace.